a lot of modern culture is built on the idea of avoiding discomfort and chasing cheap pleasures. The problem with this is that it makes us sick. In our evolutionary history, we can trace it back to our ancestors. They built up patterns of avoiding discomfort, avoiding pain, and embracing things that felt more pleasurable. Our ancestors, however many years ago, that continuously exposed themselves to pain were more likely to die. You stick your hand in a fire, you're gonna die. You're out there in the wilderness, you get third-degree burns, you can't really survive. So it was conducive to our survival as a species to avoid discomfort. And this is one of the mechanisms that led to us, being able to survive. The problem with this, though, is that not all discomfort is bad. In fact, discomfort is very important and needs to be embraced. For example, discomfort often drives a lot of forms of growth. A lot of people who suffer and are traumatized end up growing from their trauma and hard times. Spiritual enlightenment, for example, was most likely first discovered because someone was suffering, right? You can, read up on Buddhism. What's that whole religion essentially about? It's about finding the truth of the nature of reality. That's what spiritual enlightenment is, in order to relieve yourself of suffering. Same thing with technological advancements and all sorts of breakthroughs in science as well. A lot of this stuff was driven by pain and discomfort. So discomfort is very often a powerful motivator for growth. And like I said, discomfort is not always bad. We have to learn how to relate properly to discomfort on an individual level and on a collective level, or else we're doomed, because discomfort often points us in the direction of something that we need to be looking at. For example, in relationships, it's highly likely that people will trigger each other and, bring out very deep unconscious wounds that are stored within our unconscious and subconscious minds. That's just how relationships work. They really bring out our attachment system and all sorts of childhood patterns that have kind of just been laying inside of us. They've kind of just been hanging out inside of us for X amount of years, and the context of an intimate relationship is great for bringing them out. And when you get triggered, a lot of the time in an intimate relationship, most of what's happening is it's your own patterns of pain that are being brought out, and it's easy to project that onto the person that you're in an intimate relationship. Same thing with all triggers, whether it's a politician you hate, a political party that you hate, a religion that you hate, anyone who you hate. It doesn't really matter the relationship. Relationships in general are designed to bring out pain in us so that we can heal. And if we're constantly avoiding pain, then it's highly likely that we'll screw up our relationships. Pain will arise. We'll project it onto the person that we're in a relationship with, whatever the relationship is, and we're going to inevitably screw up that relationship because, we're projecting all of our unconscious stuff onto them without taking responsibility for the fact that I am suffering, I'm in pain. Why? What's really going on here? Why does this situation trigger me? And really getting to the bottom of, why it triggers you, not just intellectually, but really as a active participation of your entire being, right? Mentally, yes, but emotionally, even physiologically, right? All these things are very connected spiritually. Emotional discomfort, just as one form of discomfort, can point us to underlying trapped energies and unconscious patterns that continuously create suffering in our lives. And discomfort is a very valuable way that your body actually communicates to you, right? Discomfort is a way that your body talks to you. Discomfort tells you that your habits are unhealthy, right? Oh, I'm really anxious every day. I'm depressed, right? Why is this, right? What are you doing in your life that leads to those emotional outcomes? Are you working jobs you hate? You're not interacting with people. You don't feel connected to people. You have unhealthy habits. Maybe you're eating a lot of junk food. Maybe you're scrolling on Instagram too much. You're waking up and grabbing your phone immediately. So our whole sort of spectrum of pain and discomfort and all the various forms that it really comes in are very valuable messages that our body gives us. Right? A very obvious one is, of course, sticking your hand in a fire. Your body's telling you, don't do that, right? This is damaging the system, right? It's damaging our body. But the more sort of subtle ones are a little bit harder for us to clue in on, especially emotional ones, because our culture, right, Western world, is very emotionally unintelligent. There's no real deep emotional intelligence whatsoever. If you want to be emotionally intelligent in the Western world, it's something that you have to take responsibility for and actively build basically on your own, because it's not taught in schools. It's rarely taught in most group settings. In fact, a lot of this stuff is avoided. It's actively denied, repressed, suppressed, avoided, and we're indirectly and sometimes even directly taught to continuously do that. Right? So discomfort can tell you when your job isn't a good fit for you. It can tell you when there's a problem in your relationship and either you have to end the relationship or something has to change. It can tell you when you're not living in alignment with your values. It can tell you when you're trapped in bad habits. It can tell you what food you should be eating. Right? If you eat a bunch of junk food, you feel bad after, right? You have to actually be aware of the discomfort, right? It's like, oh, I did this and like now I'm kind of just feeling uncomfortable, right? It tells you very interesting information about the patterns of your life. So embracing discomfort builds resilience on multiple levels: mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. And without embracing discomfort, you can't really build genuine intelligence. It's not really possible. And I use intelligence in a very broad way, not just like your conceptual thinking skills. That's a very limited way to think of intelligence, and that's usually how we think of intelligence, and it's kind of an embarrassment. Intelligence is very broad: emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, kinesthetic intelligence, yes, like logic and reasoning as well. You have to be more integrated as a being, right? If you want to really get to high levels of consciousness and intelligence, it's not just about like thinking, right? It's more complicated than that. And without discomfort, it's very hard to be healthy, because you see, when we are kind of just living in the world, we're growing up, things happen to us that overwhelm us, they traumatize us, they cause pain, and we don't really know how to handle it, especially when we're young, and even into adulthood. Even as a full-grown adult, things happen, right? And if you can't process it, it overwhelms you, and you kind of just repress it into your unconscious and subconscious mind, and it doesn't ever go anywhere. And in fact, when you're trying to sort of clean out your shadow, when you're trying to go back and process it, it's going to be uncomfortable. It will be painful. And that's a very necessary component to cleaning yourself up. Right? If you can't embrace the discomfort of your, repressed emotions, repressed pain that's literally stored inside your body, it's like stored in you, it's inside of you, you're never going to clean it out, right? If you can't begin to embrace like your tensions and contractions, right, and just uncomfortable sensations in your body, you're never going to really get a clean look at yourself. So it needs to be embraced in order to really begin to see yourself clearly. Another very important point is that the truth and being honest with yourself and others is very often uncomfortable, because so much of our lives are being lived kind of out of alignment with what is true, and it's kind of just dishonest, right? These are skills that you have to develop and values that you really need to have. You need to actually have integrity and a deep willingness to see what's true, and you have to just do it for the sake of what's, true, not because you want to dominate someone or be right or, whatever. Or you have to be willing to let go of your agenda and your beliefs, right? These are like values and skills and, patterns inside of yourself that you have to cultivate. But a lot of this stuff can be pretty uncomfortable, especially in the short term, right? It can be very, very difficult to admit to yourself that I have a lot of repressed pain inside of me, and I have to go to therapy and do meditation retreats, right, in order to begin to clean this stuff up. And this is the reality for like 99% of people on the planet, right? This is like a very core part of just being healthy psychologically and emotionally. And the thing is, though, is that after a certain amount of time, it actually becomes very pleasurable to value the truth and honesty. There's a sense of, lightness to it, right? There's a sense of just in touch with reality when you're being truthful and honest, right? Because you're not sort of denying something that exists. When you're being dishonest, you're inventing something, it takes more energy out of you, and you're kind of denying something that exists. You have to play this whole game of bullshit when you're lying. Whereas when you're truthful, you're kind of just being with what is actually the case, right? You're kind of actually in alignment with reality. And a life without a deep desire for truth, just for the sake of truth, will by default be built on delusions, which is uncomfortable, right? That's suffering. It's kind of bound to just collapse. And in order to move more towards truth, you have to embrace those difficulties. You have to embrace the discomfort that comes with living a life of delusion, living a life of ego, living a life of selfishness. And you have to admit it to yourself. You need to be able to admit to yourself that like, wow, like I am living in very selfish ways because I'm, struggling to survive, or I have all these unconscious patterns of lack inside of me, right? It's like none of this stuff is very easy, and there's going to be discomfort that arises, and we have to embrace it, or else we're not really going to get anywhere individually in our own lives, and even just collectively as a species, right? If we aren't in alignment with truth, we're going to die. Like, we cannot live in bubbles of our own delusions and expect to get along as a species, expect to build like any real sense of connection and understanding amongst each other, or just really like coexist in any sort of functional way. It's just not possible. So discomfort has to be embraced on a lot of levels, right? Let's say you go for a run, right? That's very often kind of uncomfortable, right? You're sprinting, let's say you're weightlifting, let's say even you're stretching and you're very stiff. That can be kind of uncomfortable, but it's all of these sort of like, it's just these little things that you have to get clear about that can be uncomfortable, but when you embrace them, they lead to development, they lead to growth, and they're very necessary for building your life, for being actually emotionally intelligent, for building spiritual intelligence, right? It's like without that first step of embracing discomfort and not mechanically avoiding it, you're kind of just going to be spinning your wheels in the mud. You're going to be trapped in a cycle of chase meaningless pleasure and avoid discomfort, because that's kind of how our society is unconsciously set up, right? There's so many sort of easy escapes: phone, Instagram, notifications, email, movies, Netflix, junk food, right? Friends calling you on the phone. There's so many easy ways to just, avoid your pain and temporarily replace it with shallow pleasure. And all that pain, it doesn't go anywhere. Like I said, it's literally stored inside of your body. The pain will say this is like your pain, right? When you kind of cover it up with pleasure, it stays there, but that's exactly what I said. It gets covered up, right? It's like the pleasure kind of just stays there for a little bit. It still doesn't feel very good. And then it kind of subsides, and then you're, feel the pain again, and then it's even worse, right? Because like you thought you got rid of it, and so we have to learn how to actually process discomfort and just be okay with it. Right? We have to learn how to listen to discomfort, right? Just ask yourself, like, what is this discomfort trying to tell me? What's this emotional discomfort trying to tell me? What's this physical sensation trying to tell me, right? Because our body is very complicated. Our body is highly intelligent. It's constantly giving us all sorts of complicated and nuanced signals that you have to learn how to listen to, right? From my point of view, it's very easy to listen to it because I've been meditating for 5+ years. But, from the point of view of someone who hasn't, it's like, what's this Lucas guy on the internet saying? My body is just like a hunk of meat and it's dumb. But no, it's not. You just don't know how to listen to it. So you got to get comfortable getting more into your own body, being honest with yourself, like radically honest, right? If you hate your job, don't say that like, oh, it's not that bad. Say like, I hate it. If there's a problem in your relationship, you have to acknowledge it, right? It's like, be very honest, get clear about these things. Discomfort will arise, right? Embrace the discomfort. What is that trying to tell me? And trust in that path, right? Because it's true. That's why this is so powerful, because it's truth, right? When you're continuously embracing what is real, right? What is actual, right? What is true, you end up living a very great life, right? And if you just continuously live a life of avoidance and cheap pleasure and delusion, right? Like, look what this is doing to society. Look at the radical increase in various mental health problems, right? Just notice how much disease is just spreading in various forms, mentally, emotionally, even physically, right? Obesity, all these sort of, crazy problems that we're experiencing nowadays, right? So that's it for this video. I'm doing one-to-one coaching. You can book a free call with me. Link is in the description. Take it easy.